Amazon has officially greenlit the Fallout show for a second season. We knew they wanted to make a second season. They talked about continuing the story in a second season, but it's official now. It's been greenlit. There will be a continuation of this story. And I can't tell you how happy that makes me, because there's nothing worse than watching 8, 9, 10 episodes of a series only to get to the end and realizing that it was canceled and there will never be any more. Thankfully, that's not going to be the case with the Fallout show. This story will continue. Let's talk a little bit about the clues they gave us in the series as to where they'll continue the story and what I hope they'll continue to explore in Season 2. As a consequence, this video will contain spoilers. So if you want to avoid spoilers, turn back now. Let's start at the end. We see Hank McClane in a full suit of T-60 power armor walking through the Mojave wasteland. He passes by a Deathclaw skull. Deathclaws are iconic creatures in the Fallout universe, and I was frankly surprised that we didn't see Deathclaws or even super mutants during the first season. Well, aside from a super mutant arm under a sheet at the Enclave, but regardless, I think the reason for this is they didn't want to laden the first series with every single reference they could possibly make to the Fallout series. They probably wanted to save some of the best bits for later series, but by putting this skull here in the Mojave wasteland, I think they're trying to tell us that in Season 2, we may get to see some Deathclaws. Who knows, maybe we'll be lucky and Hank will find his way to Quarry Junction. That'll be fun. I'd also like to see some super mutants. It's hard to think of a Fallout game that doesn't have super mutants, and to have them seen so briefly in Season 1 makes me think that they may include them in Season 2. They even hint at this during the show. Maximus's squire gets his foot crushed by Maximus, and then he stumbles upon an amateur wasteland pharmacist who gives him a wonder drug that heals his foot. Well, one of the only drugs we know about in the Fallout universe that really is a cure-all is FEV. But FEV has the nasty side effect of turning you into a super mutant. A bit later, this poor guy gets shot through the neck with an arrow. But of course, that doesn't kill him. He's able to pull it out because he took that wonder drug, whatever it is. If what he took was FEV, it's possible that he could turn into a super mutant. At the time, he was afraid that he was going to turn into a ghoul.
I think you might be a ghoul.
Oh no. They'll kill me if they find out.
But this isn't how being a ghoul works. Ghouls don't grow back body parts. Ghouls don't heal themselves. When they get damaged, they keep their damage, which is why the ghoul had to sew his finger back on. He didn't regrow a finger, he had to save the old one and sew it back on. So whatever cocktail of drugs he took didn't turn him into a ghoul. Maybe it began to turn him into a super mutant. But then again, this isn't exactly how FEV works. FEV works by dipping somebody into a vat of FEV. Only then can you turn someone into a super mutant. So I hope they include super mutants in Season 2, and I hope they explain to us exactly what drug it was this guy took. Though it looks like they dedicated Season 1 to the Gulper being a big monster, if they dedicate Season 2 to a Deathclaw being a big monster, maybe they'll save the super mutant for Season 3. We can only speculate as to why Hank would be going to New Vegas, but they give us plenty to think about because of what we learned at the end of the series. At the end of the series, we see that Bud Askins, representing Vault-Tec, called a meeting with the heads of some of the major corporations in the nation, including Robco. As I covered in my last video where we told the entire story of Vault-Tec as it's told by this series, we learned that Mr. House, along with representatives from Big Mountain, West Tech, and elsewhere, were part of this great game, where companies competed using Vault-Tec vaults to produce the ideal human society. Now, Hank here was just a junior executive at the time that this meeting went on, but perhaps he knows something that we, the audience, don't. His motivations for going to New Vegas are unclear, but I'm sure they'll clear that right up for us in Season 2. We get every indication that they're going to be tackling New Vegas in Season 2, because during the end credits, they have a slow pan out of the streets of New Vegas, where we see clear evidence of an awful battle. We see ruined NCR vertibirds, we see Deathclaw skeletons, and wrecked Securitrons that were part of Mr. House's personal army. Which means that if they go to New Vegas, we're going to get a canonical ending to Fallout New Vegas. At least I think it's highly likely that we will. I don't know how they're going to set the show in New Vegas if we don't at least learn what happened in New Vegas in 2281. I hope they explain Moldaver a bit, because I think she's actually a really good character who tragically dies at the end of the series. I was surprised about that. We don't learn how she's there. We learn why she's there. She wanted to pick up where she left off 200 years ago with her research into cold fusion. And so somehow she got in touch with an Enclave scientist to gain access to her cold fusion research that was purchased by Vault-Tec before the bombs dropped and promptly forgotten about in some database somewhere. How she knew this guy would have access to it is not explained. How she got in contact with him is not explained. Why he decided to risk everything, including his life, to deliver this information to Moldaver is not explained. I hope they'll explain that in Season 2. Moreover, I hope they'll explain how she's still alive. We understand how Hank is alive because he worked for Vault-Tec, and he was cryogenically frozen as one of Bud's buds in Vault 31. But Moldaver, or Williams as she was known, wasn't one of Bud's buds, so she couldn't have been cryogenically frozen by Vault-Tec. I guess this means she was cryogenically frozen some other way, but I'd really love to learn exactly what that way was. We also see her in one of Lucy's flashbacks. Moldaver was there when she and her mother visited Shady Sands. And we can infer from the way they reacted to each other that Rose and Moldaver knew each other pretty well. So if Moldaver was frozen, she had been unthawed for quite some time. That's assuming she was cryogenically frozen to begin with. Perhaps she is here 200 years after we saw her before the war by some other means. But I'd love to learn what those means were. Why she was unthawed, if she was cryogenically frozen, at this time when she meets Rose and Lucy at NCR. I want to know why she went from being a scientist concerned with cold fusion to a revolutionary trying to rebuild the NCR after the destruction of Shady Sands. I believe that there is more to the story that the showrunners really want to tell us, and so I'm excited more than anything for Season 2 to learn the answer to this question that Season 1 leaves us with. Recently, Todd Howard and Jonathan cleared up one of the biggest lore controversies about the show, and that was the date 2277, listed as the date that Shady Sands fell here on this chalkboard. Thankfully, we learn that no, Shady Sands was not bombed in 2277, it was bombed after the events of Fallout New Vegas.
We're careful about the timeline. There might be a little bit of confusion in some places, but everything that happened in the previous games, including New Vegas, happened. We're threading it tight there, but the bomb falls just after the events of New Vegas.
That makes the entirety of Fallout New Vegas canonical and removes the continuity error. It doesn't, however, change what's written on this chalkboard. If 2277 wasn't the date that NCR was bombed, what's it a date for? We get the impression from the interview that the date corresponds to the decline of the NCR. It's not the date the NCR fell, it's the date the NCR began to decline. If that's the case, then having the word fall on this chalkboard is a mistake because it misleads its audience. But putting that aside for now, learning how the NCR began to decline in 2277 is exciting, and I really want them to elaborate on that more, because the year 2277 is the same year the NCR defeats Caesar's Legion at the first battle for the Hoover Dam. And from everything we learned about the NCR during the events of Fallout New Vegas, yeah, it makes sense that the decline of the NCR would have happened after they first met the Legion, because the NCR was only weaker 4 years after their victory against the Legion. They got rid of Hanlon. The NCR was filled with bureaucracy that wasted a lot of time. Yeah, they had gotten weaker and less efficient after that date. So if by fall they actually meant decline, it makes lore sense and I want them to explore it. Another question I had is, where's the rest of the NCR? We know from the events of Fallout 2 and New Vegas that the NCR spans a huge swath of the West Coast, going from San Francisco and even further north all the way down to the Mexican-American border, right? It's a huge swath of land, and they were even moving east towards the Mojave during the events of Fallout New Vegas. It's a very large nation, and Los Angeles is a small part of it. Now, Shady Sands was the capital of the NCR. Well, the first capital of the NCR. That's an important bit. The billboard we see says that Shady Sands was the first capital, implying that there were others, meaning that NCR power could have been concentrated elsewhere after the events of Fallout New Vegas before the bombs dropped on Shady Sands, meaning the NCR might still be around somewhere. But even so, even if Shady Sands was just the first capital and it didn't really have any political significance when it was destroyed just after the events of Fallout New Vegas, I wonder why the rest of the NCR, if it's still out there, hasn't come to its rescue. Now, I realize that Shady Sands is just a huge smoking crater, but there's the outskirts of Shady Sands, there are the survivors from Shady Sands. There was clearly enough land and resources and people who wanted to fight for the NCR and fight for Shady Sands after the bombs dropped destroying it that Moldaver was able to build a small army, right? So there was clearly something there for the NCR elsewhere to come back for. And I wonder why they didn't. I hope they explain that in Season 2. I hope they show us where the NCR is and what they have been doing in Season 2. I hope we get to see a robust, strong, and hopefully competent NCR in Season 2. One of the last things the ghoul says before the series ends is,
Where's my family?
200 years after the apocalypse, and he still wants to save his family. We know from the flashback sequence that the entire reason his wife was working at Vault-Tec was to secure a place for themselves in a vault.
It guarantees us a spot in the vault.
We've got money. We can buy a spot in the vault.
One of the good vaults.
But when we went through the list of inhabitants of Vault 31, we don't see the names of Barb Howard or Janie Howard on this list, which I suppose makes sense because Vault 31 was meant for junior executives, part of the Buds Buds program, and Barb was a senior executive. And in fact, she tells us that she secured a spot for herself in a vault that controlled all other vaults. And that's not what Vault 31 was. Vault 31 only controlled 2 vaults, Vault 32 and Vault 33. So if Barb Howard didn't go to Vault 31, which vault did she go to? Is she still there? Was she cryogenically frozen? And why didn't Janie make it in there? If Vault-Tec dropped the bombs in 2077, why would Barb ever allow Vault-Tec, as a senior executive of Vault-Tec, to drop the bombs knowing that her daughter, even if she was divorced from her husband, her daughter was out there with him? I believe that's a part of the story they're probably itching to tell us, and I can't wait to hear it. As I said in my review, I love the Brotherhood as they're depicted in the show, and there are a few things I want them to explain and elaborate on in Season 2. First, we need to know about this. In the show, this ship is never named, but in promotional images for the show, Vanity Fair dubbed it the Caswanon. However, sharp-eyed viewers have been watching 4K footage of the show and have zoomed in on the airship to discover none other than the Prydwen marked on the side of it. Is that intentional, or is that a mistake? That is to say, did the showrunners intend for us to see that there? When they had this airship come into the scene, were they knowingly putting the Prydwen there, or putting a sister ship of the Prydwen called the Caswanon there? It was clearly put there intentionally because it's actually slightly different than how it's presented in Fallout 4. In the show, the word Prydwen is before the Brotherhood of Steel logo on the starboard side of the ship, But in the game, the logo is on the left side of the text on the starboard side of the ship. The only explanation for that is if the showrunners purposefully put the Prydwen on the side of the ship. But it still could be a mistake. Perhaps they originally intended for the Prydwen to arrive, only to change their minds later after they already modeled this ship in the show. And then after shooting the scene, decided, no, we're going to change the story a bit. This isn't actually the Prydwen, it's the Caswanon. Maybe it's just a mistake. Or maybe it's not. Maybe this really is the Prydwen. Either way, it needs to be explained. If it's not the Prydwen, we need to know what it's called. Is it called the Caswanon? Is it called something else? Who's driving it? What chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel does this airship belong to? Or if it really is the Prydwen, why is it here and not in Boston? Where is Arthur Maxson? If he's still alive, exactly how did he survive the events of the Commonwealth? That, of course, would give us a canonical ending to Fallout 4, which, I kind of think we need if they're going to put the Prydwen in the TV show. Also, the Elder Scribe of Maximus's order says something really interesting toward the end.
We will start a new brotherhood with me as its head and the likes of you as its sword.
A new brotherhood? What is he saying? Does he represent all of the elders on the West Coast or just his own local chapter of the Brotherhood? Because it kind of sounds like he's planning a bit of a revolution in the Brotherhood, that he wants to seize control of all of the Brotherhood's assets on the West Coast, maybe even the East Coast. What did he mean by that, and what is he planning? Moldaver succeeded in creating cold fusion, limitless free power. And then she died, so now the Brotherhood has it. Moldaver, representing the NCR, was using cold fusion to power everything, to power Shady Sands, to power her neighborhood. In the Brotherhood's hands, they're going to hoard that technology and keep it just for themselves. I think Season 2 will clearly cover conflict between the NCR, or remnants of the NCR, and the Brotherhood, who now has control over cold fusion. Free power. One of the best things the show does are the flashback sequences to Cooper Howard before the bombs dropped. And towards the beginning of this series, he's a capitalist and a well-respected actor. He's not afraid to embrace a sponsor.
Well, this is America. Everybody has a sponsor, and I'm not ashamed to earn a living.
He's a patriot and a veteran.
I wore the T-45 when we almost lost the great state of Alaska to the Reds.
He served his country. But then we learn that he's divorced his wife, who worked at Vault Tech.
Why the hell is Cooper Howard working kids' birthday parties?
What else? Alimony.
The commercials for Vault Tech that he's now famous for, and he's accused of being a pinko commie.
Pinko.
Yeah, I still took my money.
I want to know exactly how this played out. We get the impression, of course, that he morally objected to Vault Tech threatening to destroy the entire world, and once he found that out, he was unable to represent that company ever again. Perhaps that was the beginning to the end of Cooper Howard's career, which caused him to be a victim of the Red Scare. That's the impression we get, but I want to see it play out. I want to see in flashbacks how that happened. I'd like to learn more about the negotiation Moldaver had with an apparent chem-crazed raider gang that led them to agree to accompany her and NCR soldiers to invade Vault 32 with the ultimate purpose of getting into Vault 33. The raiders are murderous and crazy, taking chems and just murdering for sheer pleasure. They don't really act like disciplined NCR soldiers. There are a few that do, which makes me think that Moldaver brought a few NCR soldiers with her and then convinced a bunch of raiders to work with her in order to infiltrate Vault 33. I wonder why she'd be willing to murder so many innocent Vault dwellers who were guilty of nothing but being victims of Vault Tech themselves. After all, the residents of Vault 33 were breeding stock for Vault 31. And they didn't know this, but Moldaver presumably did, which is why she was there to begin with, and yet she allows these raiders to go on a killing rampage. Maybe Hank's accusation against her at the end of the series is accurate.
I did what was necessary to save our people. And that woman over there, she's no different than me.
maybe she really is no different than Hank, willing to destroy one society to save her own, just as Hank destroyed Shady Sands to save his, in his deluded reasoning. When Moldaver is about to leave, she has so many survivors on their knees before her, and she gives an ultimatum.
Them or her.
I'm guessing she's saying, who do you want to die here, Lucy or all of these people? One life for many. And of course, Hank chooses to save his daughter and places her behind a blast door. Moldaver then sets an explosive and runs, but at the very end shows mercy.
Maybe you should do what you do best. Run and hide.
Giving them a chance to escape. My question here is, where are all the raiders? The next time we see the interior of Vault 33, all of the raiders are apprehended and in prison. The same raiders who raided the armory in Vault 33 took all of the weapons, started murdering everyone in Vault 33, which allowed Moldaver to bring it to its knees so she could kidnap the Overseer and get what she wanted. Those same raiders are now in prison? A big chunk of the story was missed there. How did that happen? How did a bunch of unarmed vault dwellers overpower a bunch of raiders that Moldaver left behind in Vault 33 after she escaped? Why didn't the raiders just leave the way they came? Even if she did destroy the door to Vault 32, blocking everyone inside, which she did, it only took two guys a few minutes to move the rubble enough so they could get into Vault 32. And we still need to learn why the Vault Dwellers were now suddenly able to overpower all of the raiders and imprison them. Maybe all of the raiders passed out from too many chems. Maybe they ate so much that they fell into a food coma. The problem is that the show doesn't explain this to us. It's just a big gap in the story that we've got to fill in ourselves now. And I hope they do that. I realize that this part of the story is over, that they're now moving on to the next part of the storytelling, but that's a big part of the whole takeover of Vault 33 that isn't explained to me, and I'd love to have that little piece of the puzzle filled in. I'd love to find out exactly how the people in Vault 32 discovered what was going on in Vault 31. And maybe this story will tie back into Moldaver's story. Perhaps it was Moldaver who let them know what was going on in Vault 31. Maybe getting Vault 32 to destroy itself was all part of Moldaver's plot to get to Hank McClane, so she could get the code to reactivate her cold fusion project. I'm just spitballing here, that's just a guess. I'd love to see them explore that story a bit more. The Enclave makes such a brief appearance in Season 1 that I want to see more from them, which isn't really what I wanted going into the show. I was perfectly happy with the Enclave not being mentioned and being a destroyed villain from the past, but they brought the Enclave in such a compelling way that I now want more of that story. If the Enclave remnants do exist, so many years after the bombs dropped, so many years after they were destroyed in Fallout 2, so many years after they were destroyed in Fallout 3, I want to know what they're up to, where they're at, how are they governed? Do they interact with people above ground? How do you become an Enclave scientist? And how exactly did Wilzig know so much information about Vault 33 and Lucy McClane herself?
You've been brought up in a meritocracy where people pride themselves on doing the right thing.
I hope they broaden the story of the Enclave in Season 2. I hope they give us a bit more information about the wonder drug that slows down a ghoul going feral. We know that this drug didn't exist in any of the games. It's novel to the show. And since it's novel to the show, I hope they elaborate on it a little bit more in Season 2, just so we know exactly what it is in this universe that can keep a ghoul from going feral. Then there's this very brief scene at the end of the series when Barb and Bud are holding their conference meeting at Vault-Tec headquarters. Before Barb lays the bombshell and talks about Vault-Tec dropping the bombs, she first gets a notification on her Pip-Boy. Then she briefly looks up and through a window sees the silhouette of a man. And that's it. That's the entire scene. Who is that guy? Why did she look up at him before talking about dropping the bombs? What is his role? Bud just oversaw Vault-Tec for Southern California. Could this guy be the head honcho in charge of all of Vault-Tec? Could he be a member of the U.S. military? Or could he be part of the U.S. government? Maybe someone who became part of a little faction known as the Enclave many years after 2077. We don't know, but the show is telling us something here, and I want to know exactly what it is they're trying to say. And finally, we learned that Vault 33's water chip is broken.
The water chip is destroyed. The vault only has enough water to keep our population alive for 2 months.
Oh no, it's like Fallout 1 all over again. Vault 33 only has a few months of fresh water left. What are they going to do? Are they going to send somebody out to get a water chip, and when they find a water chip, exile that person to the wasteland? I don't know, but that's a part of the story they're going to have to explain in the next season. Those are some of the things I'd like to see them cover in Season 2. But based on the creativity of the things that I've seen in Season 1 that I couldn't ever predict, I'm really eager to see where the showrunners are going to take us in the next season. But what about you? What are some of the things you would like to see them tackle in Season 2? Let me know in the comments below. I publish new Fallout videos each and every week on my channel, so if you don't want to miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. If you have already, but you still feel like you're missing out on YouTube notifications, consider following me on Twitter at Oxhorn. I update Twitter manually with every new piece of content that I publish. I've got a plush for sale. It's ready to ship, but I've got limited inventory, and I'm almost sold out. So if you want to make sure that you get one before they're gone forever, snag one now. I've also got a shirt shop with completely unique designs that you can't find anywhere else. My designs come on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. You can find them on other products as well, like smartphone cases, pillows, posters, mugs, stickers, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in another way, consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. YouTube members get little badges that appear next to their names in the comment sections of my videos, and access to ox emojis that they can use in my video comments and in the live chats of my live streams. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with more Fallout videos.